Greetings for the day. I'm Dr. Priyanka Singh, Assistant Professor in the Department of English at Aryakanya Mahavidyalaya, Shahabad, Markanda, Kurukshetra. This lecture has been prepared under the aegis of Director General Higher Education, Haryana, for the students of undergraduate English class, BA Pass course, semester 5. This lecture on the use of English language will focus on two key areas of spoken English: weak forms and intonation patterns. The lecture will introduce to the students the strong as well as weak forms of words that are characterized by accented and unaccented patterns. The lecture shall also provide the list of words that use weak forms, general rules governing their usage wherever applicable, along with relevant examples. The lecture shall next introduce intonation patterns, explaining terms like tone group and tonic syllable, followed by explanation of grammatical and attitudinal function of intonation. General guidelines to use different tones like fall, rise, and rise fall will also be provided along with examples. This will help the student to develop an understanding of usage of weak forms and intonation patterns. Let us now begin with the first topic of this lecture, weak forms. Very often, as non-native speakers of English, we find it difficult to understand the conversational English that is spoken fluently by the native speaker. The reason is that the native speaker uses some words in their weak forms to which the non-native speaker is alien. A knowledge of use of weak forms is extremely helpful in understanding listening comprehensions, conversations, and interactions, thereby attaining fluency in spoken English and leading to overall development of communication skills. Please note that the use of weak forms add to the general fluency of speaker of English. The student now needs to remember that there are a number of words in English which have two or more qualitative and quantitative patterns depending upon whether they are accented or not. When these words are accented or when they are pronounced in isolation, we tend to use the strong form of these words. And when they are unaccented or used in sentences, the weak forms of these words are preferred. When used in sentences, the weak forms exhibit reduction of length of speech sounds, weakening of vowel sounds used in them, and replacement of strong vowel sounds with weak vowel sounds I, U, or A. Let us now look at the table that lists the words that have weak forms. While we go through this table, please keep in mind that some words have two or more weak forms. The rules governing their usage are given in the table. The student should carefully note the same. Also, you can see that the table also provides examples for weak forms as used in sentences for reference. To begin with the articles, we have article A, which is pronounced as A in its weak form. So the sentence, "This is a book," is actually pronounced as "this is a book." An in its weak form is pronounced as un. The has two weak variants, the, which is pronounced when the is placed before consonant sounds. The is pronounced as the when it is placed before vowel sounds. As you can see in the two sentences, the boy left the ground, the area was dry. Next we have auxiliary verbs starting with is. Is pronounced as sir when it is placed after words that end with voiceless sounds p, t, k, f, th or h. Is pronounced as z when it is placed after words that end with voiced sounds b, d, g, v, the, m, n, ng, l, r, y, w and all the 20 vowel sounds. Is pronounced as is when it is placed after words that end with the speech sounds s, z, sh, zh, ch and j. So if we refer to these sentences over here, is would be pronounced differently in the three examples. The book's on the table, the boy is late, this is a book. Next we move on to am, which is pronounced as in its weaker form. The next word is are, which is pronounced as in its weaker form. As you can see, the r is kept in brackets over here, which means its pronunciation is optional. Please remember that in English, the sound r is pronounced only when it is followed by a vowel sound. As you can see in the two examples over here, the boys are eating apples. R is followed by the word eating, which starts with the vowel sound E. Therefore, R will be pronounced in this case, as suggested over here. In the second sentence, the boys are dancing. R is followed by the word dancing, which starts with the consonant sound D. So in this case, R will be reduced to mere weak vowel sound A. So in this case, the sentence would be said as the boys are eating apples, and in the second sentence, R will be reduced to A and the sentence will be articulated as the boys are dancing. Next, we have was, which is pronounced as was in its weak form, followed by were, which is pronounced as were in its weak form. Similar to are, the r here is optional. Next, we have has, which may be pronounced as has if it is placed initially in a sentence. When I say initially, I mean when the word is placed in the first position, in the beginning of the sentence. Has is pronounced as sir when it is placed after words that end with voiceless sounds p, t, k, f, th or h. Has will be pronounced as z when it is placed after words that end with voiced sounds b, d, g, v, the, m, n, ng, l, r, y, w and all the 20 vowel sounds. Has would be pronounced as us if it is placed after words that end with the speech sounds sa, za, sha, zha, cha and ja. Next we move on to had. Had may be pronounced as had if it is placed initially in a sentence. It will be pronounced as merely d sound if it is placed after personal pronouns. I had gone, I'd gone. Had would be pronounced as ad in other positions. Have would be pronounced as have if it is placed initially in a sentence. Have would be pronounced as were when it is placed after personal pronouns, and elsewhere it would be pronounced as of. Next we have do, which has two weak variants. Do would be pronounced as d when it is placed before consonant sounds, and it would be pronounced with the weak u sound as do when it is placed before vowel sounds. Does would be pronounced as does in its weak form. Can would be pronounced as kun. Could would be pronounced as cud. Shall would be pronounced as shall. Should would be pronounced as should. Next we have must, which has two weak variants. Please keep a note of the same. Must is pronounced as must with the t being silent. Please carefully note, when must is placed before consonant sounds, the t has to be kept silent. Must is pronounced as must when it is placed before vowel sounds. Will is pronounced as will when it is placed initially in a sentence. It is pronounced as merely l sound when it is placed after personal pronouns, and it is pronounced as ul in other positions. Would be pronounced as wad when your sentence starts with the auxiliary itself. It is pronounced as d when placed after personal pronouns, and it is pronounced as ad elsewhere. Next we have prepositions, starting with at, which is pronounced as ut in its weak form. For is pronounced as fur in its weak form, where the r is optional, depending upon the fact whether it is followed by a consonant or a vowel sound. From is pronounced as from. Of is pronounced as of. Please be very careful with the usage of preposition of. It is not the f sound that is used, it is v that is used in case of, and it is reduced to the of speech sound. To has two weak variants like do. So the first one is t, which is used when to is placed before consonant sounds, and it is pronounced as to when it is placed before vowel sounds. In case of prepositions, please note that the weak forms are not used when the preposition is placed in the final position in a sentence. When I say final position, I mean the preposition is the last word in the sentence. Say for example, the sentence, where do you come from? From is placed in the final position. That is the end, the last word in the sentence. So its weak form will not be used. Its strong form will be used in this case. The rule is only for the prepositions. Please do remember. Next we have the conjunctions. And is pronounced as un. As is pronounced as us in its weak form. Than is pronounced as done. That is pronounced as that. But is pronounced as but. We come to the pronouns now. He is pronounced as he when it is placed initially in a sentence, and in other positions her is kept silent and only the short e is used for he. So in this particular sentence, he said he wanted a break. So in this case it would be the first option. He said he wanted a break. Her again has two variants. Initially her would be articulated with the r being optional, and in other positions it is just the option of her that is used. Him is reduced to im, where the her is kept silent. The teacher gave him a book and not him a book. So her in this case would be kept silent. His is pronounced as is in his weak form. I washed a shirt. She is pronounced as she. Me is pronounced as me in its weak form. Them is pronounced as them. We, its weak form is we. Who is pronounced as who. You is pronounced as you, and us is pronounced as us. Some miscellaneous words to add to the list. Been is pronounced as been. Some is pronounced as some. However, the rule will not be implemented if the word is someone. So its strong form would be used in that particular case. Sir is pronounced as sir, with the r being optional. Be is pronounced as be, and the last word in the list, there, is pronounced as the, with the r being optional. Let us now move to the next topic, intonation patterns. To begin with, let us first understand what intonation is. We must be conscious of the fact that no language is spoken in the same musical note all the time. There is a variation in the pattern in which an utterance is articulated. At times, the speaker varies his tone, sometimes high and sometimes low, like I just did right now, giving additional meaning to his utterances. Intonation may be defined as the speech melody or the musical flow of words within a sentence. Please note, it is not mere melody superadded to an utterance, but is complementary to it. That is, it does not merely play a decorative role, but also performs a linguistic function. It is as important as any other aspect of grammar, like tenses or clauses, etc. And it conveys a variety of meaning. Before we move ahead in our understanding of intonation and its patterns, we need to consider three important factors. First, division of utterance into groups. Second, the choice of syllable to initiate pitch movement. And third, the choice of tone. The division of utterance into groups refers to grouping long sentences into small groups while speaking. Say, for example, in a sentence like, if it rains, stay back in office, I can divide the sentence into two small groups. The first group being, if it rains, and the second one being, stay back in office. Each group in this case would be called a breath group, since the primary object in breaking the sentence is physiological. These groups are also called sense groups, which indicate that the pauses cannot be made arbitrarily, which means that the pauses have to be made in such a way that the sense of utterance is not lost. These are called tone groups because each group forms a compact unit and must be said with a particular intonation. Next is the choice of syllable on which the pitch movement has to be initiated. So once the sentence is divided into tone groups, the speaker has to choose one syllable in a tone group on which the pitch movement will be initiated. Please remember that normally content words are selected for pitch variation. The syllable on which a pitch movement begins is called the nucleus of the tone group. It is also called the tonic syllable. Please remember that the choice of nucleus will depend upon the meaning that the speaker wants to convey. In other words, the speaker will initiate pitch movement only on that syllable which fits the meaning that he wants to convey. Say, for example, in the sentence, Sita hates ice cream, special emphasis can be given on Sita, or hates, or on ice cream. If the speaker wants to convey that it is Sita in particular and not anyone else who hates ice cream or something, the choice for pitch movement would be Sita. If the intention is to convey the hatred that is absolute, the choice for pitch variation would be the word hate. And if the message is that it is only ice cream that is hated, and other sweet dishes or puddings are liked, the choice of pitch variation will be the word ice cream. Finally, the choice of a tone has to be made by the speaker, which has to be in accordance with the meaning intended by the speaker. The syllable on which the pitch change takes place is marked with one of the following tone signs. The option that the speaker can choose from include a fall, which is represented by a backslash, a rise, which is represented by a slash, fall rise, a combination of backslash and slash, and a rise fall. Please note that an utterance may have more than one meaning, as can be seen in the example. He's just been promoted. While the fall confirms the promotion, a rise on the same word puts a question on that promotion. Intonation patterns serve two major functions: grammatical function and attitudinal function. Very often, intonation is used as a means of distinguishing different types of sentences and also highlighting the emotional attitude of the speaker. This function of intonation may be called grammatical function or the attitudinal function of intonation. In the organization and communication of meaning, no sentence, however carefully constructed grammatically, can convey the desired message unless it is said with an appropriate tone. Therefore, grammatically, intonation helps one to distinguish whether a given sentence is a statement or a question, a command or a request. Attitudinally, intonation helps us to know whether the speaker is polite, kind, angry, hesitant, sincere, or the other positive attitudes. Though it is not possible to fix context and tone, for the convenience of the student, general contexts in which a suggested tone can be used are given. Please note that this is not an exhaustive list. To begin with, the contexts in which falling tone may be used: statements that are complete and definite. Fall tone can be used in WH questions which are neither polite or impolite. They can conveniently be used in commands. A fall tone can also be used in requests that you want to sound like commands. Then, falling tone is preferred in invitations. In exclamatory expressions, we tend to use a fall tone, and definitely in tag questions that tend to force the listener to agree to the speaker. Rising tone is used in questions that are answered in one word, say yes or no. It is also used in statements that are intended to be questions. In requests, again, a rise tone is preferred. You can also use a rise tone in commands that you want to sound like requests. Then, a rise tone is used in WH questions that show the positive side of your attitude, that is your friendliness, your politeness, warmth, personal interest, and the like. A fall rise tone can be used in two different ways. It can occur on the same syllable or be divided on two separate syllables. On the single syllable, when used, it normally indicates something implied, something that is not expressed in the utterance. Say, for example, if somebody asks a question, do you play tennis? And your answer is like, I do, but not really always. So you use the word sometimes along with the fall rise tone, which would indicate that it is only sometimes and not always that you prefer playing tennis. So the word would be articulated something like sometimes. Then a fall rise is used in reproach, that is criticism or accusations. It is used to show your hurry up attitude, your sense of urgency. When divided between two syllables, a fall rise may mean encouraging or being sympathetic with the person, or even insisting. That insistence is supposed to be mild. Next, we come to the rise fall. This combination is a bit tricky for the non-native speakers. It generally reinforces the meaning conveyed by the following fall. The initial rise may indicate warmth, anger, or sarcasm, which is confirmed by the following fall. It may be used to express enthusiastic agreement, suspicious interest, your mocking attitude, your suspicion, or your being sarcastic. The students can refer to the two books mentioned in this slide. The first one, A Textbook of Phonetics for Indian Students by T. Balasubramanian. The second one, A Course of Phonetics and Spoken English by Sethi and Dhameja. I hope this lecture on the weak forms and intonation patterns gave you a clarity on the usage of the same. Thank you. Greetings for the day. I'm Dr. Priyanka Singh, Assistant Professor in the Department of English at Aryakanya Mahavidyalaya, Shahbad, Markanda, Kurukshetra. Having been introduced to the speech sounds in the lectures on phonetics, followed by lectures on weak forms and intonation, the student can now practice transcriptions, weak forms, and intonation patterns in the exercises given in this presentation. To begin with phonetic transcription, which refers to representing in writing the pronunciation of a word using International Phonetic Alphabet, the words for practice are words in sheet 1, summer, nature, wonder, eternal, skeptic, rain, melancholy, air, proper, recompense, flowers, rather, ecstasy, dirges, bows, yonder, desolate, exercises. Words in sheet 2, terrace, flanks, overhead, orchard, perfection, bare, countenance, surrender, mountain, purple, pretense, beauty, delicate, shadows, desert, awake, laughter, daughters. Next, we move on to the exercises for weak forms. In this exercise, the student has to give the weak form of the underlined words in the sentences listed. Please pay attention to the position of the words while writing their weak forms. Please see whether they are placed before vowel or consonant sounds, after voiced or voiceless sounds, or whether they are placed in the initial, medial, or final position in a sentence. The words as listed in the sentences are, in the first sentence, the, second, he, third, was, fourth, has. In the fifth sentence, we have two words, has, her. In the sixth sentence, of, the. In the seventh sentence, would. In the eighth sentence, are and from. In the ninth sentence, do, which is placed in the middle and the final position. And in the 10th sentence, the word is do. In the second exercise, the student is required to use the words listed in sentences using their weak forms. Please note, if a word has two or more weak forms, the student has to form a sentence using each weak form. Say for example, the first word in the list is to. It has two weak forms. So the student will form two sentences using the preposition to. The other words in the list are is, the, have, was, had, her, from, of, he, will, should, must, his, been, does, do, at, can, him. Finally, we come to the exercises on intonation. In the sentences listed, the student has to mark one tone, a fall or a rise, on a nucleus, that is, a word selected for pitch variation. Say for example, in the first sentence, what a fine piece of cloth. The student can choose the word fine for pitch variation. Once the word is selected, the student will mark a fall or a rise on the word and give the reason. In this sentence, I have selected the word fine and marked a fall, which is represented by a backslash that slants downwards from left to right. And my intention is confirmation of quality of cloth. The other sentences in the list are, we had a wonderful time. Pass the salt, please. All of us make mistakes. George is a tall boy. The door is shut. I love chocolate cake. Is your son in the picture? The teacher is coming. I saw a wounded dog. In this exercise on intonation, the student has been given a meaning or an intention that has to be achieved by marking an appropriate tone. So, the student has to select the right word and right tone to match the meaning targeted. For example, in the first sentence, can I help you? The speaker has to sound polite or inviting. That is, the speaker has to show his readiness for help. Therefore, the right word would be help, and since the speaker has to sound polite, using a rising tone would be the right choice. In this sentence, I have marked a rise represented by a slash that slants upwards from left to right, placed before the word help. The other sentences in this sheet are, you are participating. Session will start tomorrow. I'm already late. How beautiful. I'm hurt. He banged the door on my face. References are provided to the students once again. These include a textbook of phonetics for Indian students by T. Balasubramanian and a course of phonetics and spoken English by Sethi and Dhameja. Thank you.